All you need is a little juju. All you need is a little juju. All you need is a little juju. All you need is, all you need. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of A Little Juju podcast. And this is something new that we're doing, the new extension to A Little Juju podcast for YouTube. So I think I'm gonna call it a little Juju interview, but I don't know. But either way, I'm very excited to offer this and for my first guest to be a friend of mine, a fellow Marylander. Hess Love is here. And so I just want to say thank you so much, Hess, for being here. Hess is a Hoodoo practitioner, honestly, a scholar, an amazing writer, and someone that I honestly look up to, whose words have honestly have changed me, even just from seeing stuff on Facebook. So I'm really excited to create this space for Hess to be here. So thank you so much, Hess.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. To. It's not your first person that's in Baltimore, is it?
No, I interviewed someone from Baltimore last week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's like Baltimore week. Like, we taking this shit over.
Yes, it's Baltimore week, Maryland week. Okay, so let's get right into it. So how do you identify yourself? I know I said a few things, but how do you identify?
I identify myself as Black, a Hoodoo practitioner, a conjurer. I know that Mama Rue has made mention on Facebook recently about the differences between that, and that was something for me to really swallow, because I also have been using Hoodoo and conjure interchangeably. A queer person, a mother. I do like an independent scholar. Like, I am in school, but most of the things that I research are actually outside of school. And just somebody that really loves humanity, loves the world, and learning how to do that a lot better.
Aww. I'm curious just because you brought up that distinction, and I've said this a little bit on the show too, sometimes using Hoodoo and conjure interchangeably, but there is a distinction. Can you talk a little bit about the distinction that you found?
I'm trying to remember. Oh my goodness, I have to remember exactly what she said, because like she really broke it down. She was like, Hoodoo, conjure, root work, and something else, like completely different things, and that people use them interchangeably. And I was like, whoa, yeah, it's me. I use them interchangeably. And I cannot remember how she and so the reason I can't remember, because I couldn't I'm still digesting how she differentiated Hoodoo and conjure. But I remember partially in a group that she runs, she was saying that a lot of people can consider themselves Hoodoo, because Hoodoo is not only a religion and tradition, but it's a people, it's a culture. And you can be a Hoodoo and not have a specificity, but not all Hoodoos are root workers, not all Hoodoos are conjurers, kind of thing. So Hoodoo is the base level of who you are and who we are in this tradition. And so that was kind of the first concept I'm really swallowing. I'm like, that makes sense. And then that you work your way and you earn your way up to root work. And I think that she's made mention that the word conjure was a lot of times something that white people kind of added to as a word for us to use. And she was especially saying, I think it's Hyatt. I can't remember his whole name, but people who wrote the Beliefs of Southern Black Folks, or that whole big 5-volume anthology, were saying sometimes the people that wrote those used the word conjure, and they were interviewing people that didn't always know what they were doing or talking about, or probably just straight up lied. And so she was talking about the historical connotation of that word not always being something that I guess that Black people use naturally, but was kind of fed to us to say conjure. So it was really interesting.
Interesting. I'd be curious to do more research about that, but I have actually heard, this idea of just because you practice Hoodoo doesn't mean that you conjure, because conjuring is actually working with a spirit of something, and you might not necessarily be intentionally working roots and putting things together. So that does make sense. Thank you. Okay, so speaking of Hoodoo and conjure, how did you find that work? Were you always interested? How were you raised? What's your religious and spiritual background?
I think with a lot of people, I kind of first started learning about African and diasporic traditional religions that were not Hoodoo. So with Asheshe or other Yoruba-based traditions, or Vudan, and kind of wondering is there something every other country in the diaspora seems to have something? Is there something that Black folks in the U.S. have? And literally stumbling into that and trying to figure out what that was. And with most Black folks, you kind of grow up and we become more intentful in learning Hoodoo. And then we look back and realize what our elders and our grandparents and our parents and our families were teaching us were Hoodoo, but it just didn't have a name. They weren't gonna, like, they didn't come out and say, I'm gonna teach you Hoodoo or anything of that nature. It was just the way that we lived. It was the way that we did things. It was the way that we like held funerals and the rituals we did when someone died, when someone just gave birth, and kind of looking back and like having the knowledge now to know what the name of it is and say, oh my God, that's what this was. So that's kind of where I find myself. I'm not really a church person. I know that a lot of people grew up in the church, and I've gone to church, definitely, but I have never been that person who had to go to church as a kid or had to go every Sunday. So even though I know very base level on like church culture, it's not as in depth as kind of recognizing being there like day in, day out, every week, and kind of being able to recognize so much throughout the year. So I feel like my understanding or knowing of Hoodoo is kind of secular in that way, and not like secular as in not sacred, but like secular as in the Christian way of talking about being secular. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. It reminded me of the article that you wrote around learning really about Hoodoo through your grandmother, and saying, I just want to amplify this point of like, it's not always about our elders saying, okay, baby, now I'm about to teach you some Hoodoo, but really just looking back to, and that's how I felt through this article, really just looking back to your past and seeing like, oh, my grandma, she did feel a type of way when you said like, when I swept too close to her feet. And, and recognizing that as Hoodoo. So sort of what moment in your life kind of coined those moments as Hoodoo? Like, how did you stumble upon the actual practice to be able to say, oh, wait, I've done that?
So it was learning about like what I think it's dismissed as Black superstitions. And kind of, I just thought, because like I know that growing up I believed them, and then my dad would come like, oh, those are just superstitions, your grandma being weird, don't worry about it. And so just kind of growing up and learning like these are Black superstitions, like, but the whole thing was sweeping the feet, I had no idea anybody else's grandma did that. And so like kind of like reading that, I was like, oh my God, like I was not alone. And then like learning that a lot of Black folks have almost like lost their life because they almost swept their mama's feet. And she was not playing, she would take them out of there. So definitely like looking through folklore and superstitions, listening to a lot of older Black people speak, and then also studying more so about Black like death rituals in the US. And just the way that it's a book that I read called I think it's Lay Down Body or Lay Body Down. And it's about like African American grief work in cemeteries. And in the book, she was saying that throughout all cultures, no matter how much they have lost, you can find some of the most retention through how they do death, how they process death, how they process funerals. And I found that very, very true, because Black people still, even though a lot of our grieving practices have been adulterated, we still grieve in a very distinct and special way. And just kind of thinking about like death being and transformation being like a really big theme in my life. And I've experienced a lot of that in major ways. And also growing up with my grandparents, they were older, so there was always somebody dying that they knew, unfortunately. And so just kind of looking back at that and just seeing all the rituals in terms of what they did when somebody died was how I kind of was like, oh my God, that was Hoodoo. And then also learning about petitions. I had no idea they were called petitions, but I knew my grandmother wrote things out to manifest them, and she had like a big journal as well. And I just thought that was just her thing. And like growing up and learning like Black women do words, they speak, whether they speak them, they pray, or they write them. And my grandmother was really big on prayer, and learning about just the conjure that's also in words, and the relationship that Black women and Black femmes have with words in order to bend the world around them has been like those defining moments of like, wow, like this is what Hoodoo is.
Yes. I love, wow, everything you just said. But yes, to the bending of the words and how Black women use words, because it is such an important part of, I think, so many of our spiritual traditions, the power of prayer. And I know you weren't necessarily raised, super Christian, but I think for those who were and in different spiritual spaces, we know like praying is just, You just got to pray on it. And I think, in some moments, I was just talking about this recently on Twitter, like back in the day, feeling like, why everybody was talking about prayer? Like, I don't care about praying. Like, go do something. Yeah, everyone always sending your prayers, but like, what are prayers? That's not action. But now being in a place of like, actually prayer is action. It is a different form of action, but it is action and it is work and it's meaningful.
It is. Yeah, words are action because like you speak it, like you speak it or write it to be like you do something with these words and you put life into them somehow. And you're right, like, and like looking back on like how like the church people, because I have seen church folks pray for folks, the sick and the shut in and everything, and like what they were doing with that were conjuring wellness, or at least if they couldn't get the person to be better, they were kind of helping them transition smoothly into the next realm. So it was really just a way of caring for people that is really beautiful. And you're right, like there is like power and strength in words. And plus we know words because we use words to change people's minds, to teach people to decolonize and, learn about anti-Blackness and how to fight it, learn about misogynoir and all these other things too. It's hella powerful. Words are super powerful.
Yeah. And you're definitely a conjurer with your words. That's definitely how I see you. Like you are an amazing, amazing writer. I know I said it before, but like, amazing. So as we are talking about transition, I wanted to get to this a little bit later, but since we're on it now, I was reading your article entitled how I use ancestor veneration to navigate my mother's death. And I thought it was so powerful, especially as you told the story of your mother passing and then your grandmother who raised you after your mother passed, also passing. So having to deal with grieving almost 2 times over, especially of this energy of mother. And I want to know sort of how ancestral elevation and veneration has helped you process and move through your grief. Not that the grief goes away, as you said, but how you move through it.
Ooh, that is so heavy. I think it's, for the longest time, like I kind of viewed grief as something to get rid of, because growing up, like my family would help me process the grief, but it was always like you move up and you move on and you don't forget, but you become elevated from it. And I noticed like I keep getting elevated in my life, but this grief couldn't elevate it with me. And I'm like, I cannot knock this thing. And I'm just like, oh my God, what do I do with, like, I cannot get rid of this grief. So it's really kind of helped me like learn, like you can't get rid of it. You learn how to manage it. And then also that ancestor veneration, is a facet of grief, like because you're remembering, you're paying reverence to, you're saying this person's not here. And the thing that I love about Hoodoo especially, and one of the reasons like I tilt towards it, because learning that some, not all, but some other diasporic or African traditional religions believe that if you die tragically, like you cannot be, what is it, like, revered, like in death. Like it's kind of like you kind of don't get forgotten, but you're not someone you put on the altar. You're not someone you work with. And in thinking about so much that Black people go through with the U.S., in the U.S., that almost all of us die tragically in some way, whether we literally die tragically or because life leads up to your death, it's a part of your death. We experience so much tragedy and trauma. Like tragedy is a part of our life regardless. And so kind of realizing that Hoodoo acknowledges the way things are right now as opposed to the way things were before whiteness, before colonization. And the work of doing ancestral elevation has been like the main thing. Like this is why we elevate people up out of the means in which they died and lived, in order to, help us not lose them, because, but also help them like move up in the world so we can work with them. And especially since some of the people who died tragically, we do have to work with them in order to like untie generational things and generational knots. And I have a lot of generational things that I've inherited from both my mother and my grandmother, who's my paternal grandmother that raised me. And so I couldn't really let them go because the work that I need to do generationally like heavily depends on them. So like just the process of elevation and knowing that I don't have to leave them. I can elevate them, and I continuously elevate them. Like it wasn't a one and done thing for me, and it's still not. But also kind of like they are part of me, and they are people who, like for a while I was really feeling alone, like I'm really facing life alone, but also like working with ancestors, it's just kind of like I might be feeling physically alone, but I know that there is an entity or an energy that wants well for me, what's good for me, and is working for me, and not just like a distant memory of something that I can no longer tap into, but like something I can work with and that I can use to elevate myself as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that. And you know, it kind of reminds me of my episode where I talked a lot about this called Niggas Die Different, and just the dramatic ways that Black people, you know, that we do pass. And so Hoodoo being this tradition that acknowledges, oh, there we go. Hoodoo being this tradition that acknowledges like everybody did not die in a peaceful, loving way, because we do not live in a peaceful, loving place. So many of us around peaceful, loving things. And so being able to continue to work with those spirits is super important. I'm just wondering, do you have any specific advice for anyone who might be dealing with grief in this moment, as we are in the middle of a global pandemic, as we are also in the middle of various uprisings throughout the world, really? Any advice on, or things maybe that you have pulled or read around how we can do grieving rituals, or how we can celebrate and honor the lives of those who have passed on?
Agreed. Like, we die hella different. I don't think we've died the same for hundreds of years, and like it. Ooh, that is so heavy and so deep, and just like our relationship with death, and how that even informs our tradition, and how we see of like, no, we cannot let people go unless they were an absolute monster. Like, we have to bring them up because we need them to resist. And the energies that they do have lingering, probably like the angers or frustrations, whatever they may have, to help us bust through, you know, like this thing that really does make us die hella different and sometimes traumatic. And also thinking about the same reason that we die different has impacted the way that we do rituals around death. Because like in that same book I mentioned, it mentioned like some slave masters were more lenient and let people do their rituals. Some did not. A lot of people had to get buried at night. There was a certain direction in which Black people had to be buried. And I forgot, was like your head was to the east or something, but it was like really east to west, not north to south. And I'll tell you, like, I'll send the information to you, but I forgot which way it was. And I was thinking about this pandemic and the fact that Black people, sometimes these people are dying and they cannot get their families' bodies, and the way that is impacting like how this person can be buried. Will they be buried in the right way? Because the belief is if you're buried in the wrong way, like, you're gonna be really jacked up.
Right.
And so how it's impacting our grief ritual in that as well.
That's such a good point. I've been thinking so much of how people have not had access to the bodies of their loved ones because of the pandemic, and having funerals on Zoom, you know, and just like, what is that actually doing to the Black psyche? What is that doing to the spirit psyche? And how are we going to move forward in this new way that we've been having to live and also die with each other? I've been thinking a lot about that, so thank you. So speaking of ancestors and elevating and passing, last weekend it was actually, was the Say Her Name event in Baltimore. And it was such a powerful, powerful event. I just want you to tell people what that is first, and then we can just really get into it. But can you just speak to what that event was and how it came to be?
I'm excited to. So it was it's heavy. So it was like knowing that we don't get to like properly do our grief rituals the same way that we would originally want to, especially when someone dies tragically. Sometimes trying to get everything together to do the funeral in a way that you want to is overshadowed by your grief, because you not only have to grieve the person died, but you have to deal with the events that, you know, caused their death. And if the person that died is someone whose name made the national news, you have all these people, you know, in your face. You have all these folks who are holding on to your grief as well, and it just challenges so much. So just thinking about like Corin Gaines, Sandra Bland, like the way that their own families have been, you know, impacted, you know, and how they grieve just because one, they died tragically, and right. Two, because like their grief became a collective grief, and how that, you know, changed up their own like personal family rituals, and kind of doing a ritual to like elevate these, you know, particular people is how it started. Like the idea was to not leave these particular Black women and femmes and trans women as well alone, to not be elevated, to not be thought of. Like we would start an elevation process. So we would build an altar as the first day, and it being on the ground to, you know, go up higher as each day goes. And then the energy from the community altar building, from the libations we pour, from the ways that we dance, we sing, would carry us over into the next however many days to elevate them as well. And so just kind of doing an ancestral elevation process for Black women, Black femmes, Black girls, unfortunately, little girls, Black trans women who just lost their lives to police violence, domestic violence, or just other like systemic misogyny law.
Right. It was such a powerful event. It was a very heavy event, and not necessarily in a sad. I mean, it was grief heavy. It was joy heavy. It was empowering heavy. It was heavy, just all the way around. But it was so good because you could feel those spirits moving in that place, and it was one of the most impactful things that I've been at or attended or anything in a long time, maybe ever. So I'm just really grateful to you and the other organizers for creating that space, especially in Baltimore too. Where there's just our own little bubble of situations that we experience that I think sometimes people outside of here don't fully get or understand. It's very particular to this land. And so to know that there were like 3 altars in Baltimore honoring the lives of Black femmes and Black women, all Black women and girls, it was just so moving. It was so moving. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of creating spaces like that, or even community altars? Like, why should we do them? Should we do them? What are they for?
So the importance of creating a community altar, I know that the basic level, we know that an altar is a way of taking up space and declaring space for the people and the things of the altar. And so like at the basic level, we're taking up space for Black women and femmes and girls, taking up space for their stories, their lives, their faces, their names, and to remember them. But other than that, on top of that, like when you build an altar, you kind of take everything that is in you and you build it. And so you build it outwards. And so kind of to have, particularly the reason why I like for it to be Black women and femmes and girls and trans women and non-binary folks, femmes and everything, is that we are taking what's inside of ourselves to build up like an altar or a sacred space for each other, not just the women and the girls who were killed, but also each other. And we're also elevating ourselves along with that altar because our energy is in there too. So that's like, I think that's the most important part of the altar building, is recognizing that we are doing this, you know, we're taking everything that's inside of us and all our griefs and all the ways that we have been erased and dismissed, or, you know, maybe like shut down or silenced. And we're, you know, taking that power and creating like a physical, tangible thing, saying it's not going to happen to us anymore. And we're not going to let it happen to these people anymore either. So that's the importance of altar building. And also just so folks can, I think it's important for community to see altars, because they might go home and recognize the altars in their homes, or they might go home and think about a way that they can honor the folks in their lives and folks that they've loved and lost. So I think that's another part of altar building. And also, I think building an altar specifically within the Hoodoo tradition is important, because a lot of people don't know about Hoodoo still, and we're on Hoodoo land. And so it's wild to be like, everyone knows about everything else but Hoodoo. So it's also a way for Hoodoo to take up space too, and for people to come and learn and inquire. And they don't have to, you know, in turn go home and practice it, and be a practitioner. But I think that Black folks in the US should know about Hoodoo and our special days and things, the way that Mexican people know about Day of the Dead, the way that Haitian people know about Geed. Like, we need to know about this stuff.
Right. And really, in Baltimore, there's altars everywhere. There's altars all over the place. And whether people use the language of calling that space an altar or not, or a shrine or not, they're all throughout the city. And I think it matters to give it a name, or it matters to be like, yo, like, we already are doing this, but I'm just letting you know we're doing a thing. Like, that is an ancestral thing. It's not, we don't just put out the teddy bear and the candle and the balloon or whatever for someone who's passed, and the Hennessy bottle just because. Like,
definitely.
We've carried that. So I also think that even just having an altar space where we're saying this is an altar space, this is us taking up space. Y'all probably done this, you've seen this, but this is giving it a name, and this is Hoodoo, is also really powerful too. It's part of that relearning, like, oh, we've been doing this.
Yeah, and we know the power of finally finding out the name for something,
Yes.
whether we're finding out the name of hoodoo or finding out what anti-Blackness is. Like, we know the power of being able to name something and how that shifts worlds. And so that, like what you said, like being able to say, oh my God, that's an altar, the balloons, like the candles, the cigarettes sometimes on the ground, like the Barry Baltimore way, and like one cigarette. All of that is just a way of honoring.
Right.
There was 2 cigarettes on the altar. I think somebody wanted to put a blunt. And I was like, if y'all want to, that's what you really want to sacrifice, go ahead, because it's a sacrifice. You can't take it back.
Right. If you putting the weed up, okay, that's the spirit's weed.
Right.
That's the spirit's blood. Okay, true. Okay, so yeah, I love what you said about also knowing the name of something and being able to call our things a thing and having tangible. That's the power of the word. And so I want to get a little bit into Chesapeake Conjure Society and why you started that. Well, first, just tell us, what is Chesapeake Conjure Society?
So Chesapeake Conjure Society started because we've done multiple events. We just didn't do them under any formal name. It was just us folks in the area doing random things. And everyone would keep saying, oh, I want somebody to do stuff with or whatever. Like, oh, just hang with us when we do our stuff. And so I kind of had a thought to formalize it when I started becoming more intentional about wanting to learn about conjure in the Chesapeake area specifically. I think because in the same way that hoodoo gets overlooked as a diasporic tradition, like the Chesapeake area gets overlooked as one of the major points of hoodoo in the similar vein of Charleston, in the similar vein of Louisiana, in the similar vein as the Delta. And so it's just like, okay, so we have to do so much work to help elevate the Chesapeake and let people know, like, this is one of the major places, like one of, not the only, but like one of the major places, especially because most Black people in the US can trace an ancestor back to Virginia if they go back far enough. Like, somebody came out of Virginia because it was one of the major, ports of slavery, Virginia, Annapolis, Baltimore, and also because chattel slavery in the English colonies started in Virginia. And some of the oldest African presence as a result of English colonization in the US is in Virginia, in the Chesapeake area, and just all of the ancient knowledge there too, and wanting to learn specifically, like, what are the not only the similarities, but what are things that make us unique in terms of how we conjure things and how we do things, and that also reclaiming some of our Southern our Southern heritage too, because someone's like, you are not a Southern state. I'm like, the Mason-Dixon line, we are a Southern state.
Technically are. We really are.
So it's like, y'all gonna put some respect on this area, okay? And so kind of also like combining that with like wanting to educate people more about conjure in the Chesapeake, with the fact that there is a family and community in Chesapeake doing things, conjure things. Just made sense. It just made sense to connect those two things. And to like really show that like hoodoo in the Chesapeake is a living tradition. It's not just this past thing to research.
Right. And that's so important, because I think even me being from Baltimore, like, I wasn't feeling fully connected to what hoodoo may have looked like on this particular land. My people come from South Carolina and Alabama, so I was doing a lot of focus there, but recognizing like, oh wait, also like my people been here for a little bit too. Like there's work, there's conjure, there's hoodoo, there's particular roots native to this land in particular that folks work with that might not be in Mississippi or might not be in South Carolina. So again, yes, to this, hoodoo is everywhere, wherever we decide to find it. And I'm grateful to you for reminding me to look here, to like literally here in Baltimore, in Maryland, in the Chesapeake, to find it as well.
It's some amazing stuff here. Like, it's helped me feel more grounded to actually look here, because you're right, because it's so easy I have family that come from South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia as well, especially on my mom's side. And so it was so easy for me to be like, that's the most deeper Southern roots. Even though I learned it from my grandma and her people are literally from Annapolis, I would like literally skip it right over Annapolis and I was going right down to Georgia. And I know she was like, what the fuck? As an ancestor, like, you really gonna sit here and just skip And like, okay. And so like, it was really kind of like bringing it on home and just learning about also, because our people who migrated here also brought things with them here too. And it also affected the landscape and the tapestry. And part of the biggest thing I learned is like the Chesapeake area and the Low Country area have a lot of things in common. We have so many things in common, not only with like our soul foods being seafood, but just like a lot of our folklore, like the belief of a bird flying your house, that's, you know, it means certain things, or a lot of things that we believe up here are similar to what people believe in the Sea Islands and Charleston area. And so I know that a big part of that is because of migration, but also thinking about like the fact that down in Charleston, down in the Sea Island areas, they would do the ring shouts. And then up here in Virginia and Maryland, when they would excavate like slave quarters where enslaved people stayed, especially in the kitchen, they would find like the dekinga, like the counterclockwise circle, and like artifacts would be in that shape. And they would find like marbles, crab claws, coins, like pieces of pottery, and just knowing like that's a connector, like both of those areas use the same things but in different ways, because we weren't allowed to up here be as overt in our practices, so we did things a lot more in secret.
Right. I love the breakdown. I love the connection. It just makes me so excited because it's just so much rich, and that's why I love your work too. It's just so much rich history to uncover all the time, and it is right here. Like it's literally right here in front of us. It's in our families. It's with our elders. Like it's within us. So yes, just I shade everything you just been saying. So some of the events that you have put on, of course, we just talked about the ancestral, the Say Her Name altar building event, but also like what are some other things that people can look forward to?
So we do twerk in the trees. What you know about? So we do twerk in the trees, and it's also about like sacred movement and grounded movement, and kind of really get in touch with your sensuality and just being able to possess yourself. I know a lot of times, like, you know, with water spirits, like you can heal through dance.
Yeah.
And we're like close to water all the time. And so like we're healing through movement. And we literally twerk, like we have a twerk instructor come. Toya does belly dance and instructing. We do guided meditation, we do whatever dance we do. And it's really like, it's really woman and femme centered. And that includes trans women, that includes non-binary folks. And the reason we do it that way is because we know what it's like to dance and it getting interrupted by people who want to consume you sexually. So someone comes up behind you, you're like, oh my God, I just want to dance. You know, I want to be free. I want to have a good time. Right. And we don't really get a lot of spaces to do that. Because, you know, whenever we do dance publicly, it's in like a very mixed crowd. So like it's the cleanest space for us to dance publicly and not be interfered with, and to really go into the healing part of that dancing. So twerking the trees is one of my favorite things. Please come out.
Come to a twerk in the tree. I'm at the next one.
I'm just like, they are so much fun, and everyone just feels so much better about themselves and just how they look at themselves and what their bodies can do. In the same way that people talk about exercise not being a punishment but a celebration of what your body can do, it's the same thing, celebration of what your body and your spirit can do. And it's just so, I love it. It's like one of my favorite things to do. We also visit, we do cemetery work. We work with the dead folk. So we went to, the first time, we went to Brewers Hill in Annapolis, which is a historically Black cemetery in Annapolis, and that's where my people are at. So it was a really intimate thing for me. Like, these are where my dead folks is, and where my grandma's people are. These are where, my name is Hess, and so, well, you just said that, but like my ancestors, I was named after the last woman to be enslaved in my family, and she's buried there. And her daughter, who was also named Hester, is buried there. And so like, it's just like my people are for real in there. And so that was really special. And we really want to do more work around cemetery work and cleaning them up, and, you know, also teaching people how to work with dead people. And that can only really be done like in person, you know, and also I'm trying to help like people work through their feelings about cemeteries too, because it can be a lot of spookism and stuff like that. And it's like, it's a really peaceful place. I mean, it's loud. You know, it can be loud.
Yeah,
but it's peaceful.
Spiritually loud, but it's peaceful. Yes.
Yeah, so it's just like, ain't nobody really gonna bother you, whatever. Like, ain't no human's gonna bother you. But it's like, it's like, oh hey, like I got something to tell you. Like, you're the first person, and how healing it is to like know that there are spirits and entities and energies that really genuinely want to work with people and connect, and not always in the best way. So you gotta set boundaries, but you know, sometimes. Because I've noticed like a trend of everyone saying, pick up this kind of dirt, pick up that kind of dirt. And it's like actually knowing how to work with the ground, which is where our dead folks are at, which is where their bones are, which is where their bones are, and teaching people like what makes certain type of dirt special, and starting with the most basic of learning what makes, you know, graveyard dirt special, and how you come in, how you ask for consent, which kind of goes back into like earlier we're talking about the learning about evil tradition, and in the evil tradition, like even the earth, you know, ask for consent, because before they are able to garden or plant seeds, before they like disturb the earth or plant a seed, they do a prayer of consent. And so like I think that goes so much into, we ask consent before we take the, not only for the ancestors, but for the earth, before we take dirt from anywhere. And that's also a big part of it as well.
Right. That's so important. And just being in right relationship to what we're around, which I think is so much of these traditions that Hoodoo especially is about. We just being in good relationship with the land, with the spirit, with the people, with the dead. And, you know, not getting too sucked up in the spookism and the superstition stuff. But like, there's a lot of healing that can happen in a graveyard and in a cemetery. A lot.
Yes. And especially in Baltimore, where we know like so many people are like going through different ways of dying, not only for on the street, but also in the medical industry, because Johns Hopkins is right here. University of Maryland is right here. And they have committed a lot of things, you know, toward helping us die tragically, and what death work could mean for like the community. Like, it makes me excited. It's going to be heavy, but it makes me excited for how it transforms how we grieve. And how the city particularly like grieves, and how we work through the traumatic things and traumatic deaths, and know that it doesn't always have to only exist under a layer of trauma, but it can be under a layer of empowerment as well.
It can, and they can exist together. Thank you for that. What else did I want to ask? Okay, I think I'm gonna shift a little bit as we sort of wrap up. I did want to talk about, you know, I think I get a lot of questions from people who are a part of LGBTQ community, and in the process of usually leaving or questioning Christianity, and wanting to find something that they feel aligns more with who they are, and they wonder, like, can I find who I am in Hoodoo, or can I find who I am in different traditions of the diaspora? So I'm wondering how, and I'm assuming that you have, but how and if you may have found yourself through Hoodoo as someone who identifies as queer as well. How has it been sort of impactful in affirming your identity in that way? And also just as a Black woman.
Ooh, that is... So it's so interesting, because I had a really interesting coming out story with my grandmother. She was the first person I like formally came out to, and she was alive. But her thing was like, "Are you sure? Are you sure? You don't know. You mad at some man?" I was just like, "Yes, but that ain't got nothing to do with it."
I am, but that ain't
right. I'm trying to tell you something that I think you've been new this whole time. And so kind of like I got to redo the coming out process with her as an ancestor, and it felt really good to like sit at my altar and explain all the things that like I learned about myself, and what I learned about what queerness is, with just, you know, like different ways of expansiveness is, but also learning about how Black people, like traditionally and before colonialism, and even you'll even peep it sometimes now, it's like being gay is not an other, being, you know, a lesbian or bisexual or pansexual, just loving people in general was not an other. It's just a way that it's a part of our community. And so people would try to say, oh, there is no word for gay in Africa. Like, yeah, because it was not an other, like you were just a person. And kind of you know, like kind of explaining that too, and kind of like I just kind of really explained so much that I've learned. And the reason I did that was because like she was always someone that you can get to through here, through, you know, like her mind and her learning. So that was like really beautiful. And also learning that your ancestors accept you and they love you, and they had a hand in, you are them. So like, you know, they had a hand in creating you to be who you are right now and how you stand. And even if some of them may have had a hard time in life, is that a bug on me? Outside. But I'm like sitting here, oh, it's my earrings. This whole, wow. This is a big hoop problem.
Like
this is
big
right? Big hoop problem.
Right.
Yeah, if you touching your neck, you'd be like, is that a bug on me? But just kind of learning, like using ancestor veneration as a way to like get love and acceptance from your ancestors, and kind of, you know, them understanding or knowing like they made you, you know, into who you are, and everything that you are. It is not a mistake. And also kind of learning how, it was a squirrel, girl, these squirrels in Baltimore be a mess. But also learning, they do. And also like learning about like different stories in like African and diasporic traditions, and you know, like there are different deities who may display some bit of fluidity. Like they may, like I wouldn't call them queer, I don't think that's my place, but like they have a fluidity and expansiveness that is found, you know, in gay and queer and lesbian and trans people, and knowing that that always existed. Or also kind of like looking into creation stories, and like kind of like where I kind of started settling on be like claiming non-binariness is like the creation stories. The creator was like both. They were both and neither and all, and like they, you know, like they created everything, and then after they created stuff, you know, things might have became binary, like the mother and the father, the masculine, the feminine, but also kind of realizing that like the energy of creation, I think, especially for non-binary people, I think might just be unassigned energy. Like it was an energy that's just not assigned to the dichotomy of either or. It's just like it exists because it just exists. That's like the point. Yeah, because it is. It is like the beginning of existence, and it's not an unnatural thing, but it's like very natural. It's like, you know, and so that's kind of helped me a lot to understand like my own place. Like it's an unassigned energy, but it's not like wandering or lost or confused. It's just like that's where the beginning was, you know. So that just also on a gender level, but sexuality too, especially in Hoodoo, with the blues, that has been like the biggest thing of like, whew, just like being like gay or lesbian or queer, of having that experience and looking at the blues, because like the blues is like Hoodoo gospel, pretty much, and it's like knowing like how many like lesbian and gay and queer folks were like prominent singers, and how like they were singing their blues and writing their words and saying things, and just knowing that it existed in the past, and because it existed always, and also like seeing how big of a footprint that gay people and queer people put on Hoodoo just through the blues and other forms of music and other forms of creativity and art and dance, and then where we see the intersections or the simultaneousness of like Hoodoo and our spirituality and our creative endeavors, and knowing so many queer folks find themselves in creative things as well, was like a big connector for me too. It's just like, yeah, like even with the church, like it's like always a running joke, like, you know, y'all don't like gay people, but you're a choir director gay. Like even with the church and like song and music, like there's queer people at that crossroads of where we kind of, where both worlds, like the divine and the living meets, and they meet through music and song and dance and creativity. So that's been a big thing of like kind of deconstructing the idea of a crossroads and like finding creativity there and finding like queerness there, and so many different things has been like really, it felt really home, and I don't have to fight to like be seen and to exist, especially not in Hoodoo. Like you just show up pretty much, and people still have like things from colonization, you know, of course, to unpack or whatever, but it's like with Hoodoo, I don't feel like they have the power to displace me from it, because they don't. Like I just really take up the space that I take up, and other folks take up the space that they take up. But it's like, it's unlike the church, where like the people in the church have the power to make you feel displaced from your faith. Like with Hoodoo, I do not feel that way. Like I'm standing here and you're not going to move me. You know what I'm saying? So you're gonna have to learn to get over it. And just being able to be strong in that conviction, because there is no doctrine or no book or no thing that says that we're unnatural or that we're an abomination. So it's just like, you can't move me. I will not be moved. Like, you know, so that has been also empowering.
I love that. I love that because really, I think a lot of the energy of just hoodoo in general is just like, it is what it is. Like, you're either going to work with it or you ain't. If it ain't for you, and it's just in regards to who we are, our bodies, our genders, our sexualities, whatever. Even if we have a past, it's just all of that. And hoodoo is just like, what is that anyway? Like, it just is what it is. Either gonna do it or you ain't. Like,
exactly. Like literally taking a survey of what's around, like, I gotta work with this and this ain't moving, so I gotta work. Exactly what you said. That's exactly what hoodoo is. And it's beautiful to be like, can't nobody push you off of your thing. And that's part of the reason why I try to tell people, like, don't feel like certain folks are gatekeeping hoodoo. Like, go to your family first and see what's there, because it's in you. Like, you don't have to ask permission from nobody else. So that's where you learn it from in the first place, is your family. Right. So go in your family, and even if your family were super church folks, okay, the Bible is a talisman in hoodoo. The song, like the fact that the Holy Ghost don't exist outside of Black churches. Right. For real. So I'm just like, y'all have it in there too. You just gotta really do your work. And exactly. So just also that, and learning, like, just feeling that love and that acceptance and that placement, and just kind of saying, this is mine. Yeah. And this is mine because this is my communities, and my communities are me. My ancestors are me. I am my community. I am my ancestors. And just like feeling like you have a purpose and a place, and then you are loved. Like, that is so important for people to know.
Come on in if y'all want to. This is the time to altar call. If you've been feeling called to hoodoo and you ain't know, come on down. It's time. It's a place for you. You can come as you are. Yes. Thank you. I feel like that's a good place to end, because like I was going to ask your advice or what you had to say to people who were thinking through but didn't know and felt like they weren't connected. But like, if you Black, especially if you're a Black American person, you got it. You just you got it. That's it. You got it in you. So it's about that discovery. So thank you. Okay, so tell us how we can find you. Plug your things. How can we work? What do you? We just love you and we want to follow what you up to. So how can we do that?
So I'm right. I'm not gonna say Google me because I don't think everything pops up, and I haven't done it for myself. I'm gonna have to do that myself.
No, wait, no, that's the thing though, because I did Google you and saw a lot of things. So yeah.
Oh, Google me then.
Fuck your shit.
Find me. Okay. Of course, on Facebook under Hess Love. On Instagram under Hess2Love. You can also look at the hoodoosociety.com/community link and find like a brief description of all the events that we do as a part of the Chesapeake Conjure Society. And it links to my Instagram. So if you're like, hey, you my people, I want to roll up with y'all. Like, I want to roll up on y'all and just chill, and I have good intentions. Instagram me, message me, like, people are accepted, people are loved. And we're not really turning folks away unless they're on some mess, but we haven't turned anybody else away yet. So those are the primary ways to find me. If you are in Baltimore, and after the pandemic lifts, like, you can probably almost find me at Dovco on every Saturday. You can find me like in random parks. Like, I just be around, like, especially on the weekends, be wandering like around the city, just doing random stuff. So especially if you're in Baltimore, you're just out and about doing things, like, you might eventually run into me as well.
Yes. I love it. We can go Google you. I will have all of these things in the notes for anyone who wants to know and find Hess. I will have it all written out for you. And Hess, thank you so much. I appreciate you. It's always good having a conversation with you. I'm so happy that we've been able to connect and will continue to connect. So I'm just speaking so much blessings, and thank you so much for your work. It has impacted me in a very powerful way, probably more than you understand. So I'm just offering that same love that you've given me. I'm giving it back to you tenfold. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on here. I was so excited. You want to be on the show? I was like, yeah, I don't do videos, but yeah, I'll do it. So I'm excited, and I feel so honored. So thank you, and thank you for the work that you're doing of like really like helping people reclaim hoodoo and making this literally a movement. So I appreciate you. I appreciate being here, for real.
Love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Confirm no say, and I'll never get played.